So now that we have the authentication part of the website all finished, we're moving on to the to-dos. Now, in order to do that, we have to have a way to represent all these to-do objects. What is it that we need to create? It's the to-do model. What is this, Dora the Explorer? I don't know what I'm doing. Let's move into our code, specifically the models.py, and let's make a model that represents a to-do object. Now, just as kind of a little fun challenge is I want you to create your to-do model as far as you think it has what we need. So for example, think back to the beginning intro video, like a to-do has a name. Was also a box where someone could fill in some details that we called a memo. They could check whether or not it was important. We made a mark in time when it is that was completed. Another feature that we're going to want is to know when it is that they created their objects so that we can actually go ahead and rank those to show the oldest things first and the newest things down at the bottom. Just think about those different things and try and build out as much of this model as you can. Now, there's lots of stuff there that we just talked about, and particularly connecting these things to specific users that we have not covered. But I thought this would be a fun challenge that do as much as you can. And if you can, research a little bit on your own to try and get as far as you can. But if not, just go ahead and look at what I do. This is, I'm not as strict on this challenge that you have to try it out on your own, but I think it would help you. So go ahead, hit pause, make that to-do model. All right, so hopefully that went well for you. What we're going to do here is make a new class called capital to-do. This is going to inherit this models lowercase dot capital model, and it'll have the colon here. So what does a to-do consist of? Well, I think the first thing is its title or its name. You can decide what that's going to be. I think title is a good one. And so this one is just going to simply be a char capital field. And this is going to take in one parameter called max underscore length equal to 100. I just think we shouldn't have to-dos be much bigger than that because we're going to provide a place where they can specify other details, which brings us to the next point, the memo. So I'm going to say memo is equal to lowercase models dot capital text field, okay? And with this one, I'm going to specify that blank is equal to true, meaning that someone doesn't have to fill out the memo with information if they don't want to. Being a blank memo is totally fine. So for some to-dos like walk the dog, you don't need anything. But if you're saying go grocery shopping and you want to list the things that you want, that would be a really good use case for the memo. And because of that reason, I don't think it should have a max length. And that's why I made it a text field, is because it could be a lot bigger thing. Okay. Moving on, we want to know when it is that someone had created one of these. So I'm going to make a new field called created, and this is going to be equal to a models.capital date time field. So what a date time field has is not only the date when it happened, but also the specific time so that we know this is exactly when this to-do was created. And something that's cool with this is we're going to add a preference here that's called auto underscore now underscore add and set that equal to true. And what this means is that anytime someone makes a new to-do object, it'll instantly specify the created value to be that point in time. And this field is not editable. Like we can't go back in time and say, oh, I'm going to change this to this particular thing or that. No, once we set that, it's over. So we'll see how that has a little bit of detail that we have to work with. But this will be a good way to rank or sort rather the to-dos so that a user can see, oh, those are the ones I just created. These are the ones that I really got to get done. Okay. Next, speaking of time, we want to mark down when someone has completed one of these. So I'm going to call this date completed, and I'm going to set this equal to a models dot, and I also want this to be a date time field because it's at like a specific point in time. But with this one, rather than have it auto-generate, this is something that's going to happen when someone hits the complete button. I want the opportunity for this thing to be null. So I'm going to say null is equal to true. Now you may be saying, well, we talked about something called blank and we called something null. Like, what's the difference between those two? So it really just depends on the different fields that you're working with. Like, so for example, all these text and char fields, if they are blank, that's essentially the same thing as them being null. You can specify the difference between them two, but it's just like there's no text inside of there. Whereas with a date completed, or a date time field, those they follow a very specific format that it has to know the year, the month, the date, the hour, the minute, the second. Like all of that information. You can't just have it be blank. Rather, it has to be null. So the question is, how do I know if I should do blank or null? Well, if you just go through the Django documentation, again, I showed you this page before, but if you search Django model fields, you're going to get all sorts of great information, okay? So we got that one equal to null. The next one is important. Important. Okay, so this is that little checkbox to say whether or not it's important. So this will just be a Boolean for us. So we're going to say models dot capital Boolean field. Okay, and inside of here, we're going to specify that the default on this thing should be equal to false. Okay, so the only reason I put a default is so that it doesn't always have to be specified by the user. So we'll just keep that there. And then the last bit here is we want to have a relationship to the user. So this part is very important. Let's talk about this. There are going to be lots of different users making to-do objects, and we have to have some way of knowing, like, okay, does this to-do object belong to Joe, to Haley, to Nick? And the way to do that is through something called a foreign relationship, a one-to-many relationship. The term here is a foreign key, but basically it connects one model with another. Now, the other model that we're connecting to is the user model, which we didn't write the code for, but it's imported through Django. So what we're going to do is up at the top here, we're going to do from Django.contrib.auth.models and import capital user. This is the same line that we used inside of the views. But what we're going to do with this is we're going to say a field called user, and it doesn't have to be called user. You could call this like to-do creator, totally fine. But I think user gets to the point. And we're going to say user is equal to models dot, and we want a foreign key. And then we're going to do the name of that model, capital user, comma, and then we have to specify this thing called on delete. And I'm going to talk about this for a second. For the moment, let's just type it to models.cascade, all caps. All right. So this foreign key, basically what it does is it stores the relationship between this to-do and that user. So any object that is saved into a Django database has something called an ID. The ID is basically a unique value for that particular object. So it usually starts at 1 and just counts up 2, 3, 4. You kind of saw that with the blog post, right? How when we deleted blog posts, there was like a gap or whatever. But when you set a foreign key relationship, what it does is it takes the ID of the user that's making this to do, and it saves that ID in this field. The reason this is important is, let's say I want to grab all of the to-do objects for the user Haley. What I can do is find what Haley's user ID is, which in fact, if we just go ahead and log into the admin here, like we can find this specific number. So I'm going to come back with my super user. Like let's find Haley here. Look, Haley's ID is 4. So now that we know that, if we want to get all of Haley's to do, we can search the database and say, give me all the to do objects where the user is equal to the ID of 4. And it's able to do that search, find those things, and then give us back those to-do objects. So that's why this is so important. That's what a foreign key relationship is about, is you're saying, okay, one user can have lots of different to-dos, but a to-do can only belong to one user. It's a one-to-many relationship. Okay, this is kind of getting into database talk. You can get much more involved with this than I'm talking about. There's like many-to-many relationships that can get all sorts of complicated. But anyways, this is a great starting point for us. All right. So with this, let's go ahead and save this. Anytime we have a new model, what do we got to do? We have to make a migration for it. So we're going to go to our terminal, do a Control-C, and I'm going to say manage.py make migration. Okay. And I misspelled this, I guess. Make migrations. Oh, I just needed to add an S. Okay, so I've gone ahead and done that. Next thing that I need to do is actually migrate the database. So this will actually apply these changes to my SQLite 3 database here. So I hit enter on that. Does those things. Great. Now to be able to see these, I have to go to this admin.py, and I'm going to register this here. Like, for example, if I go back to the admin, and well, I have to be running the server here. But if I come back to this page, look, there's no to-do objects. So I have to come back to my code, and here inside of my admin, I have to import my model. So I'm going to say from.models import capital to do. Okay, so then I'm going to say that I want to admin, which is what we imported there, .site, .register, and I want to import capital to do just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, reload this page, and check this out. We can click on the to-dos, and there's no to-dos right now, so let's go ahead and just manually add one. So I'm going to say something like walk the dog. This is really important, so I'm going to check that box. We have the date completed. We can specify the user. Let's make this belong to Haley, and let's go ahead and save that. And it's saying, oh, date completed is required. Okay, so I realized my mistake. If we have the code the way we do right now, if we were manually to create our own creation forms, that would be fine. But with the Django admin, if we want to be able to create these objects with date completed not set, not only do we have to say null is equal to true, but we also have to specify that blank is equal to true. So my mistake for not setting that. But since we made a change to the model, we have to go back to our terminal, and we have to make migrations. Okay. Then we have to migrate. Then we are going to run the server. Then we can now reload this page, and I'm going to make a walk the dog that is very important to me, belongs to Haley. And then I'm going to save that, and now we were able to make a to-do object. Okay, so great that we made it. Although remember, this isn't great that if I want to see all the to-do objects, this isn't an awesome name. So I'm going to come back, and inside of my class, I'm going to make a new function called underscore string underscore. And I'm just going to pass self inside of here. And I simply just want to return back self.title. So this is a little bit easier to read. I'm going to save this, reload this, and you can see, oh, walk the dog. Okay, that's a little bit better. There's one last piece that I want to talk about here, and that's that all the information seems to be showing up. The title, the memo, date completed, important, the user. But if we go back to our model, there's actually one that's missing here, and that's the created. And the reason it's not showing up is because we can't edit that piece of information. And the admin is sort of protecting us from that, saying like, oh, I don't want you to be able to touch that. You said that you didn't want to. So the way that we can make it at least show up, not even editable, but just show up there, is we can come back to Atom, and we're going to go to our admin here. And what we're going to do is specify that we want to be able to read that as a read-only field. So we're going to make a new class inside of this file. We're going to say class. You call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it to do admin. Okay, but the important part is inside of the parentheses, this has to inherit from admin dot capital model admin. Okay, and then we have our colon there, and then we set one field called read only underscore fields, and this is equal to, and we'll just put inside of parentheses here, created inside of a string and then a comma. Okay, so we're going to save this, or I forgot one piece. After the register to do, we're also going to pass forward this class. Okay, so this little model admin that we're making right here, this is essentially, if you want to customize what the admin interface looks like for a particular model, you can do that. In this case, we're doing something really simple. We're just saying, hey, add this read-only field called created. So let's go ahead and move back to our model, make sure that's the exact same name. So with this, now if I reload this page, look what's been added. This little field that says created, and it's got the time exactly when this thing was created, although there's no way for us to edit that. So there you have it. We now have a beautiful functioning model for our to-do objects. The next step for us is to go through that process of like letting the user create one, then displaying it, then completing them, updating, deleting, the whole shebang.